A showdown in the Supreme Court this week will determine whether millions of drivers who bought vehicles with loans are owed compensation. If successful, they could be due total payouts of up to £30 billion. But if you haven't made a claim yet, is it too late? I'm Lucrezia Millarini, and this is what you need to know. Our consumer editor, Chris Choi, has been following every twist and turn in this.
There have been a lot of them.
They have been a lot, because it started way back in 2021.
Yes.
When the Financial Conduct Authority banned something called discretionary commission agreements. What's that mean?
That is the technical term for what so many car buyers now get enraged by, thinking that was totally unfair. So the way that a discretionary commission works is, I'm a car trader. You come to buy a car from me. I say, I'll probably be able to help you get a finance deal, get you a loan. But perhaps what you didn't realize is that my commission got bigger if I signed you to higher interest rate. So there's a kind of baked in incentive for those people to sign you up to deals that weren't in your best financial interest. And I'll give you an example, because I was going through somebody's paperwork the other day, a car buyer, and he'd ended up paying more than 30% interest rate. This at a time where you could reasonably easily get 17%.
Oh, big difference, yeah.
Big difference. And actually, in his case, it was appalling, because he spent £8,000 on the car, ended up spending £9,000 on the whole financial deal around it. So you can see why people are really angry at what's gone on. It goes back to 2021, when the Financial Conduct Authority banned these kinds of commissions. But remember, so many millions of these deals had already gone through, going all the way back to 2007. So you've got a whole wodge of deals that are now under scrutiny, right at the top of the legal tree in the Supreme Court.
Yes, a lot of people will be interested to see where they stand legally, whether
Absolutely.
they can get any compensation.
Yeah. Lawyers are seeing pound signs, car buyers are seeing pound signs.
Yeah. I mean, interesting you talk about the lawyers. Now, the lawyers representing drivers, they've been arguing at the Supreme Court. You were there earlier on, weren't you?
Yeah.
What have they been saying then?
Lawyers for the car buyers, they are saying that the whole thing was unfair. They're using the word bribery. Wow. I mean, I know it sounds like something from a medieval court, doesn't it? But seriously, lawyers representing the buyers that are enmeshed in all this are saying it amounts to bribery, because it was an undisclosed commission that was going on to some extent behind the backs of the customers. Now, of course, the sector is rejecting those claims, but certainly for the lawyers representing the buyers, they're very firm in their belief that this is all about basic fairness.
The lawyers for the lenders.
Yeah.
Now, what are their specific arguments?
They've got three arguments, and one of them is actually supported by the government. And that, in its sense, just think about it, is quite controversial. The Treasury, the government of this realm, actually requested to intervene in this case. That's how big it is. In actual fact, that intervention request was turned down. But the basis upon which they were wanting to intervene is also one of the arguments being used by the lenders, which is that the claims could be so big. You've already mentioned £30 billion. I mean, that's eye-watering. I've seen other estimates that put it up to £44 billion. Now, the point being made by the lenders and by the Treasury is, if you have a financial sector in this country that has to pay out that scale of compensation, it's going to destabilize that whole sector, possibly make it uninvestable in the short and medium term, and perhaps, within the medium term, it's not going to be good for consumers, is the argument, because there might be less consumer credit available. You can see the logic of their argument. That's what they're saying, and the Treasury seems to be backing them in that. They've got two other strands of arguments. They say that during that period that we're talking about, most people ended up walking away with a deal that was good for them overall. All right, there might have been some commissions they didn't have full disclosure on, possibly, but overall, it was a good deal. They went with a car that they wanted at a price they were happy with. The argument goes that because the lenders were paying the salespeople these kind of commissions, it kind of reduced the overheads for the dealerships. Yeah. And therefore perhaps made the price package lower overall. And there's a third argument, which is that they say they were only applying the rules at the time, because remember, as you said, the Financial Conduct Authority banned these commissions in 2021, but before that, they say, well, we weren't doing anything wrong.
And Chris, the NFDA, first of all, explain who they are, but you've been speaking to them.
I have. They're the National Franchise Dealers Association. They represent the big car dealerships around the country. I'm not going as far as to say they've broken their silence for our podcast, but as far as I know, they haven't spoken on camera, in sound on this up until now. What they've done is they've made public their submissions to the Supreme Court. They've got an interesting argument. You're going to love this one. Essentially, they're saying anybody that went to a car trader and expected impartial, independent financial advice was wrong. We should never have been trusted for that. And I had a chat with their spokesperson earlier.
Dealerships aren't financial advisors. Typically a customer will go into a dealership to buy a car, not to get financial advice.
It's not a very good advert for car dealers, is it, to be essentially saying, don't look at us when it comes to any kind of financial guidance?
I think it is a great advert. I think the UK automotive market is a respected and great market, and I think they will try and do the best for you. They will make sure that giving you the great advice, but that's on which car to buy. Is it fit for purpose? Does it do what it needs to do? And ultimately, that's the purpose of a car dealership. You go in to buy a car.
Look, some drivers had or have already won compensation. Let's just listen to Desmond and hear what he had to say.
It was crafty, the way they done it, the way they went about it, to put money in their pockets and take it all out of mine. They're just devious, conniving, sneaky little tricksters. They came over trustworthy, and to find out how devious they really were doesn't help.
So Chris, Desmond already got a payout, but how did that happen then?
Because the lender in his case saw the evidence and decided to settle. And alongside Desmond, there have been some cases that actually went through the county courts and were settled. And that's how the whole thing has started to go up the pecking order of lawsuit. It went from county court to the appeal court in October, and now to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. And Desmond, it was a joy to meet him in a sense, because he hasn't really got a dog in this fight anymore, because he's had his compensation. Yeah. But he wants to speak out publicly to help other people that also feel they got a bad deal.
Well, that's important, isn't it? Because, as you say, there are going to be millions of buyers who are waiting to find out whether they will be entitled to any form of compensation. They'll be waiting on this Supreme Court ruling.
Yes.
So for them, if they haven't made a claim already, is it too late? Can they still do it?
It's not too late.
Okay.
It's not too late, but it is very confusing, of course. Let me give you an idea of the timetable. So the Supreme Court case has been heard at the moment. We'll probably wait until about June to get the result of that, which will be immense. That'll be a really big update on this story. But what the Financial Conduct Authority has said to kind of steady the ship is, look, the firms do not have to respond to any of these complaints until the 4th of December 2025. They've just had a bit of a pause in proceedings, and it's the same with the Financial Ombudsman that's also received 80,000 of these complaints. So there's a bit of a freeze going on. Now, if you have been waiting for the appropriate moment to get in a complaint, the Financial Conduct Authority itself says, put your complaint in. There's certainly no harm in it. What you need to do is find out who the lender was. Now, remember, the lender will be specified on the paperwork you got, but it's almost certainly different from the dealer. There'll be different organizations. So a lot of people have found it difficult to find the right paperwork. A little tip for you, which I find has worked, is if you've lost the paperwork, it happens. It's been a long time. It's worth getting a credit reference check, because the lender will probably be mentioned there. Yeah. So you just send in your complaint. Within 8 weeks, they'll acknowledge your complaint, but you won't get a full and final response until after December this year. But at least you've got the legwork done, and you're in.
And Chris, you know what? You've been following this saga for years now. We're calling it sagas. How do you think it will end?
If I was to be coaxed into a personal view, I would say that there will be payouts to consumers. What the discussion is really now all about is the scale of those payouts, because the lenders say that actually, if you analyse each individual case, the number of people that actually lost out will end up being quite small. The people bringing the claims say, oh no, it's a huge volume. And what's really, really interesting is that if the Supreme Court decides that it's bribery, I mean, that changes things. It moves everything up a gear because the payouts associated with bribery are higher. I think in terms of the reputational damage for this sector, things also ramp up. I mean, it's one thing to talk about undisclosed commissions, but to shift it up to be talking about a sector that's been involved in bribery, it's different legally and it sounds different morally. So I think we'll get clarity on that by the end of the summer. We'll get an update then from the Financial Conduct Authority towards the end of the summer, early autumn, and then we'll have a big move in December, which may take us in the territory of a national redress scheme, which is where, to simplify things, they might say, look, a lot of payouts are going to be needed. Let's have a centralized system to make this easier, more straightforward. So there's going to be a lot more miles on this road, but anybody with a claim in, it's too early to give up. Anybody that feel they maybe can put a claim in, it's not too late to put your hat into the ring.
All right, there's so much more to come, I feel, Chris. Look, for now, thank you so much. And for everyone, like Chris said, the Supreme Court will deliver its final ruling in the summer, and we'll be following it all to the very end. For all of Chris's other reporting on top consumer issues, head over to itv.com/news. And remember, you can subscribe to What You Need to Know wherever you get your podcasts, or watch full episodes on ITVX, YouTube, and Spotify. Until our next quick briefing, thank you for joining us.